Hey everybody, Tim here with today's episode of Star Trek Deep Space Nine, Season 4, Episode 9, Our Man Bashir. This is a great episode. In fact, this episode was so good, it actually got Deep Space Nine in trouble, or Paramount. And it's making me question some other stuff for reviews, so we'll see what you guys have to think about it. So this episode is a parody on James Bond movies. And when they made this episode, they had the intention to do sequel episodes to it, but MGM, the owners of James Bond, saw it and hated this episode, and they actually sent a letter to Paramount saying that you guys have crossed the line from parody to infringement, and they basically sent a cease and desist letter to any future episodes. Now, for those who have seen my Next Generation reviews, a similar thing happened there as well, where Data was doing Sherlock Holmes episodes, specifically the episode Elementary, Dear Data, where the owners of Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's estate said the same thing. They're like, we're flattered that you did this, but don't do it again. Finally, 4 years later, they made a deal where they could do a sequel, and it was The Ship in a Bottle. Whereas this episode, they never got that. MGM was like, nope, never do this again. So unfortunately, we never got to see more episodes like this. And I remember in my early 20s, I hated James Bond. I could just never get into it. And finally, somebody on Craigslist was like, hey, I have all of the DVDs at the time, and I'll sell them to you for $20. So I was like, okay, why not? More for my movie collection. So I bought it, and I binged them all, and I fell in love with James Bond series. There's 24 movies out now and 3 unofficial movies and stuff like that. Now I'm starting to wonder, I'm doing Star Trek reviews, I'm doing Golden Girls reviews with my husband, I'm doing Doctor Who reviews on Saturday. Why not maybe just add some movie reviews in there? So maybe, who knows, I'll start doing James Bond reviews, because that'll add almost 30 videos right there. So who knows? But that's down the line, who cares? So for this episode, it's like I said, it's a parody of James Bond, where we see Dr. Bashir, and he's in the holosuite, and everything from the music to the opening sequence where he can see the reflection in the bottle. He introduces himself as Bashir, Julian Bashir. I love his his secretary, who's Mona Loves It. It's so great. Everything about this episode. He talks about how Garrick ends up showing up, and Dr. Bashir's like, it's 1964, which is interesting because that would have been the same year Goldfinger came out, and it's about 2 years before the actual Star Trek show came out, but that would have been the year that they'd filmed the pilot, The Cage. So there's a lot of stuff going on there. He orders a martini. Now, what I love about this episode is, like I said, with Data doing the Sherlock Holmes one, everything had to go wrong in the transporter. Something broke down on the Enterprise, and they had to think of a way to do that, but on a space station. And personally, they came up with a great way, where the runabout was about to crash, it was about to explode. So they had to beam everybody out. But when you beam somebody out, where do those particles go? And so the transporter beam basically integrated with the holodeck. And they talk about how their physical bodies are now part of the holodeck, and that's why different characters start showing up. And we see Cisco as the villain, and we see Kira as kind of the foreign love interest, and so on and so forth. Chief O'Brien is the villain, stuff like that. Whereas their minds take over the entire station and basically shut it down, because it has to use up every particle of the computer just to store their brains in there. So it's a really interesting episode, and I loved it. I thought it was great. For the most part, I'll be honest with you guys, I don't like Dr. Bashir plots or episodes, especially because he normally gets the terrible subplots, where he falls in love with a woman who doesn't even know who Bashir is, or where he has to audition or apply to win an award, and then finally he doesn't win. For the most part, I felt like they didn't know how to write for Dr. Bashir, whereas this is the episode where I thought they did a fantastic job, and it just makes it all the more heartbreaking, where you get to the end and he's like, don't worry, I will return. Which in itself is a shout out back to the original James Bond movies, where they had always had the next one planned out, and you got to the end credits and it would always be James Bond will return in insert title here. Whereas he sadly never really returned. They didn't get another major episode. So overall, I thought this was a great episode. For those who saw this episode, did you want to see more of the Holosuite episodes like this? Go ahead, let me know what you guys think about this one. Thank you guys for everything, and I will see you guys next time for the 2-part episode, Homefront and Paradise Lost.